Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Robots Are Coming. And today we will be interviewing Michelle Rhodes-Smith, a teacher at the Elk Grove Unified School District. And in addition to going UC Davis for a bachelor's in linguistics and French, you've also gotten a master's in education at the University of San Francisco. You're also the mother to Seth Smith, a 19-year-old student from the University of California, Berkeley, a friend and a great person overall. So my name is Ken Hin, your host of The Robots Are Coming. Let's get started. So I want to start off with, first of all, your career, where you started off with your undergrad all the way to where you are now. Let's start off with that.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction, and it's really nice to be with you. I did go to UC Davis for my undergrad in linguistics as the major and French as the minor. And then as I entered the teaching profession, I got my credential, obviously. And as I entered the teaching profession, I wanted to enhance that. So I went back to USF on a satellite program, actually, here in SAC, but still the same professors for a multicultural education master's degree.
And what made you want to go into the teaching profession?
That's a complicated question. I'll be honest, in my family, girls were told they could have 3 jobs. You could be a secretary, a nurse, or a teacher. I did refuse to be a secretary. I found nursing a very difficult, trying profession, and I chose teaching. I love what I do, and I'm good at what I do, but I have a lot of teachers in my family tree.
Yeah.
But I think had I been offered or told I could have other careers, I might have done that. So I encouraged my children to follow their passions.
Yeah, and follow your passions and dreams indeed. And
Yes.
And then you taught for the Elk Grove School District for 35 years. Could you?
I've been in Elk Grove for 30 years. I taught in
30.
other places for about 5 years before I entered here. Yeah.
And how was your time as a teacher in those places?
Oh, it's been great. I mean, every day is ups and downs. You never know what human beings will bring each day to inside the 4 walls. But I've enjoyed my career.
Awesome. And now, at some point in your life, you had a wonderful son, and Seth Smith. Could you talk through who your son was
Of course I can.
Yeah.
Seth was brilliant. You had met him, and everyone who's ever spoken to me about him, the first thing they'd say is his intelligence just was immediate. They immediately noticed how full of knowledge he could be. He chased knowledge like it was something he had to have. He had a yearning for understanding the world around him. He's this crazy kid that, read his textbooks 4 times when he got bored in class. He read the dictionary. He read every single book in the library. He was just hungry to know. It was a beautiful thing to see, actually. He showed his affinity for knowledge at a very young age. He was reading at 3, like small, simple things, what you would imagine maybe a kindergartner doing. By the time he entered kinder, he was reading small chapter books. When he got into 1st grade, he went to the school I currently teach at. When he got into 1st grade, his 1st grade teacher approached me and said, "How dare you teach him so much? What am I going to do?" He challenged his teachers all the way through, and they loved that about him. His middle school and high school teachers adored that he had so much to question and offer, to the point that when he was in his honors algebra class in 7th grade, the students gathered and created a t-shirt in his honor that they all wore on Fridays, and they called it Seth Day.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing.
It seems like he was intelligent, kind, and a wonderful human being. And
he was.
Could you talk about your fondest memories about him as you were raising him from a little baby
goodness.
all the way to?
Oh, there's so many things. As you and I discussed earlier in just kind of a pre-talk, he was very theatrical, very dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
So these are memories. They're fond now, they're funny, but at the time, in the moment, I was frantic. So one was, because he had such an affinity for reading and reading above his age, I introduced him to Sherlock Holmes. And there was a movie on TCM one night, and I said, "Oh, let's watch that." So we did. Well, I fell asleep on the couch while watching it. And when I woke up around midnight, he was standing over me with a steak knife with red paint dripping off of it. And he had recreated a scene from the movie in our living room with this. And I had been painting something red. So he had found the red paint and it was just, again, he was very curious, very much wanting to experience everything. I remember another time when I came home and he had taken glue, like Elmer's glue, and had put strips of it down wood furniture legs, across the granite counter, on the marble in the bathroom. He had put it on different surfaces around the toilet seat. And I'm screaming, why is glue all over the house? And his response was, well, I wanted to see if it would dry at different rates on different surfaces. Like, that's just who he was. He was like 6 at the time.
Wow.
He was just this really curious, wondering, embraced life kind of kid.
And I could attest to that. When I first met Seth at one of our meetings for the Berkeley Not Left, Not Right Board Club, he'd be the first one to answer. He'd be very theatrical, very huge.
Yes.
And he'd answer all the questions correctly, word by word. And
yes.
I could tell that he was going to do a lot of great things.
Yes.
And I want to move on to our next topic, where we talk about what happened to Seth Smith. So for our audience who may not know, do you mind talking through what sort of happened?
I will, absolutely. Hopefully I can do it without too much emotion. So my son was going to begin his 3rd year at UC Berkeley. He had entered after high school as a sophomore because his senior year, he had taken 32 units of AP classes and passed all of those exams with 5s, the perfect score. He had received an almost perfect score in the SAT. He missed it by 1 question, and he wanted to fight them and tell them why his answer was really correct. But he entered again as a sophomore, had been there for 2 years. He was beginning his 3rd and final. He would have graduated at the end of that year. He comes home because we're not that far. We're in California. We're not that far from Berkeley. And we had driven him down because he was moving to a new apartment with former roommates and some added roommates. It was larger. It had more space. So we had moved him down on June 1st of 2020 in the midst of a pandemic. He'd been online a little for the semester before. But he was ready to go down and kind of have his life. He was 19 years old, going to be 20 in July 4th. So he was excited to branch out. But we also told him we wanted him to come home for the rest of the summer until school started in August. And I had called him and said, hey, can you come home this weekend? And he said, oh, a couple more roommates are coming from overseas. They've been traveling. I want to meet them, and I'll come home around the 24th of June. He, on the 15th of June, that evening, he'd been with his friends playing game, whatever they were doing, and decided he just wanted to take a walk and clear his head. He did that often. He loved walking. He walked through Europe when I took him there. He just was connected to being outside, and he was always a night owl anyway. And he walked about a mile down the street, about Dwight Avenue, from his apartment, and a neighbor, someone who lived in the area, he did not know him, they had never met, approached Seth from behind and shot him in the back of the head randomly. That man, his name was, or is, Tony Walker. He's currently serving 25 years in jail. He was a parolee. He was on parole at the time. He was upset about how things were functioning around him, the pandemic, George Floyd, just so many things happening. And he was, took that anger and frustration out on my son. Someone, again, he'd never met. He didn't know him. He just targeted him because he was alone. He pled no contest to voluntary manslaughter as part of a plea deal. His defense lawyer, brought the plea deal to the Alameda DA, who was there representing Seth. And the sentencing hearing was May 23rd. We all went and gave statements. In fact, I just printed off the transcript of the sentencing hearing that was sent to me by the clerk. Anyway, so yeah, and Tony at the time of the murder was 60, so he's about 62 now and going to probably finish his life in prison.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing this tragic story of yours. And it's really brave and amazing to hear that you were able to share this and go through this. And I know that was such a tragedy. And I would like to know, where was this case publicized mostly? Because I know it was huge in the Berkeley community, but
Yeah.
where do you think it was mostly publicized?
Well, mostly me.
Yeah.
It definitely was throughout the Berkeley um, media and actually the Bay Area, because I have several friends who live in the Bay Area and they say it was very publicized in the Bay Area. Berkeley had not had any kind of homicide incident in 3 years until my son. And sadly, they have had more since. Um, and so it really was a big deal. It was in a nice, decent middle class neighborhood. The person who found my son was walking their dog that night at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, people don't walk their dogs at 11 if they feel unsafe in the neighborhood. So, my son never felt unsafe where he lived. And so Berkeley side and, a specific reporter who I have become friendly with, was very prominent in getting his story and continuing the story from the night it happened. She was there the night it happened, all the way through to the sentencing hearing. She was with us there as well. There was just very little real media coverage, even in California. It was on the local news in our area because he was a local boy. But as soon as the next event occurred, it was off air and no one talked about it anymore. It was just one of many. Sadly, there were a couple, like, again, I really promoted my son's story, tried to get more. I'm involved now with like Everytown and Mom's Demand and some of those organizations. And they've all sort of helped me promote it as, again, one of so many and grieving families. But the bulk of the publicizing was local or myself through social media, mostly Twitter. Yeah, I'm very active on Twitter.
Yeah, and Michelle, you do have a very active Twitter channel. I'm amazed to be in the presence of someone so famous like yours. So you were able to publicize your son through Berkeley side, local journalists, Bay Area, and a
Yes.
lot of these activist groups. May I ask, what did you think of the response of the UC Berkeley administration, though?
At the time, I was highly disappointed. There was no like reaching out to us. I think they sent flowers, which is, a normal response. Sorry. There was a letter sent, like a emails type response to the student body, which made it to Reddit, which of course got vilified on Reddit. Basically saying this is a horrible tragedy. We know it's terrible. However, there's other pressing issues happening in the world today. So, it kind of was like, oh, this is horrible, but let's sweep it under the rug because it doesn't really bode well for our university safety. So yeah, that was kind of difficult for us.
It sounds really difficult to not have your son's name be out there and be on the front page of the news, right? Because he's your son and he's our friend. And I think we should have more publicizing them. And as I move on to our next topic, I want to talk about what things should be done in Seth's name. So one of the potential ideas is awarding Seth with a posthumous degree. What do you think of that? Because I know he was a really smart guy. He entered Berkeley as a sophomore. So
Yeah.
and he was about to finish his degree, probably just a couple classes left. What do you think
Yeah.
of that idea?
I would very much appreciate that. I think that would be really helpful to bring closure a little bit, especially from the Berkeley community, the UC community. I think that would be really nice.
And giving Seth that degree would give honor in his name and make him
well into the accomplishments that he already was working towards.
Yeah. And he was slated to head to the London School of Economics anyways. And,
yes.
Yes. I remember we had a conversation about what he was going to do at the London School of Economics. Did you talk about that and what his dreams were?
Yeah, it was funny because he was such a theater guy. Like in high school, he was very much into doing theater. He was in every show. He did everything. He was well known in the community as the theater guy. So most people thought he would go into theater. And when he said, no, I'm going to study economics, everyone was like, that's kind of outside the wheelhouse. Like, we didn't realize that was something we didn't expect. And I asked him, why would you choose economics? I mean, I know you're good at math. I know you love all of that, but why economics? And he said, because it's the study of human behavior. That you can look at communities, big and small, and try to solve some of the issues people have with each other through economic means. And so he really wanted to use economics as a jumping off point to work on larger community, big and small, worldwide issues, using economics as the medium through which to solve them.
And that perfectly transitions into our next topic, which is the Economics and History Fellowship. I know Seth was really passionate about economics, as you may have known, and he wanted to positively solve the problems in our society. What do you think of inspiring the next undergraduates, graduate students that come through at Berkeley with a fellowship that would give them the means to change the world through economics or history?
I think that would be amazing. Again, I mentioned to you before that there is a smaller scholarship here, just regionally in the Elk Grove Unified School District. They put a scholarship in his name to help students move on into theater. So that would be the other branch of his passion, to allow, to help other students go out into the world through economics and history to, help do the things he's unable to do.
Yeah, and he really wanted to solve a lot of the problems of our society in economics or history, and we need someone else to fill in issues, and that's what the Economics and History Fellowship is slated to do.
Yes.
I also want to move on to our next topic, which is I know we talked about Megan's Law. You wanted something maybe like Seth's Law.
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm aware that there is Megan's Law. For our viewers who may not know, it's a federal law that requires law enforcement authorities to make information available to the public for registered sex offenders.
Right.
So maybe Seth's Law could be something that would that would alert folks for potential violent offenders. What do you think of that, and how does it?
Yeah, that is something I have been wanting to advocate for, because I feel that Seth, he never felt unsafe. He was unaware. He didn't have the knowledge available to say, oh, there is a previously on parole violent offender a mile down the road, and maybe don't take a walk that direction, walk towards campus, walk in another direction. And again, he had taken walks often. This wasn't the first time he had taken a walk in the evenings. And he had walked through that neighborhood, through other neighborhood, like he had gone throughout the perimeter area of his apartment, and obviously onto campus. He had, felt very confident and comfortable because he had already been in those places and felt everyone there was, an upstanding citizen. So I think if students had the ability, and families, because often the students may feel like, hey, I'm in college, it's all great, this is a great place to be, which they all felt that way. I felt that way in Davis.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the ability to gather the knowledge. I didn't study a police scanner every night. Seth wouldn't do that, but he would possibly, because again, he constantly was looking up knowledge. He was on Wolfram, he was looking up what's the square footage of the country of Syria, and he could tell you if you asked him. So he would want to pull in that knowledge and say, okay, what can I find out about where I live right now, since it's away from home, it's new to me, and that might give other people some knowledge that could help them make better decisions and choices for their own safety.
And then sounds like a great idea that would help students like Seth or individual citizens to feel safer and be aware of what's around them. Next, let's discuss a more proactive police presence in the Berkeley community. What do you think of increased police presence in the Berkeley community?
I think that if the increased police presence is meant to be a proactive, tamper down acts of violence or crime, then that would be great. As you and I discussed previously, policing has traditionally been set up as a reactive event where things happen and then they show up to take reports and investigate after the fact. I think if we could find some way to bring more of a community, like a relationship between those who are there to protect the community and the community itself, instead of a fear-based. We could create a relationship, a closer understanding. And I had mentioned before that in school, like in a school setting per se, a student who feels more anonymous, who doesn't feel like people really know them, will lash out and behave in ways because they think they can get away with it. Where if you have a connection to that student, a connection to the community of kids, and you're like, I know your mom and your aunt, I know everyone in your realm. And if you do that, everyone will know. They're less likely to do silly things like pull the fire alarm, whatever it happens to be. And I think that can be then taken to a broader context. So if we had police who said, no, I know all of these people and I know them well enough that, we can tamper down maybe some impulsivity. Because I feel that when Mr. Walker killed Seth, that was a very impulsive event. He knew that he would go down, and he didn't want to get caught because, he knew that it was this impulsive thing. And even though the police kind of knew who he was, they hadn't really built a positive relationship there. And the community actually had not built a positive relationship because of his violent tendencies towards the people in the neighborhood.
And I fully believe that police officers or even community members should know who's in that community, whether it's knowing someone's name, whether it's knowing someone's, I don't know, background, interest. It's just making people feel included and heard.
Right.
I think that's one of the most important things
Right.
that we can have for any human being. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that can be harder when you're in a rotating group of students who come in and out every year.
Yeah.
There's a group there, they leave, the new group comes. Like it's hard to build that, but not impossible. Mm-hmm. And I also think that's why having some sort of a directory so students can feel knowledgeable and say, I just moved in, where are the areas that would be safer to go get pizza, where are the areas that would be maybe a little less safe to meet my friend there, that kind of thing. Give them the knowledge so they can make their own choices.
Yeah, knowledge is really important for both students, community members, police officers. I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
The next thing I want to talk about is creating more publicity for Seth's name. Mm-hmm. How do you want his name to be memorialized in the future?
Wow. I just want him to be seen as a kid who wanted to do good in the world, which he did. He's touched a lot of people. I know he, touched your life. He had a friend in high school who actually came to the sentencing hearing in May to speak. His name's Mike Infante. He was born with cerebral palsy and he's been in a wheelchair most of his life. He can walk with braces, but it's very taxing on him. And he actually is working towards also promoting Seth's name and history, because Mike is now doing local theater. Seth is the one that encouraged him to even get on stage. And he's made that sort of his life mission. Like he took Seth's words of, you can do it, buddy, you can do it, and has turned it into a career. And he attributes a lot of that to Seth. So I think what I want my son to be remembered as is someone who encouraged, someone who wanted the best for everyone and wanted to make communities better through whatever means he could. And of course he chose economics, but he just wanted to find some kind of place where all people could live peacefully. Like that was his goal.
And as someone with a short of his life as Seth, he encouraged one of the best for every single person. Even me knowing him, he encouraged me in every single way. And I believe that he should be rewarded something like the Presidential Medal of Freedom to recognize people like Seth who have made an especially meritorious contribution to security or national interests of the United States, world peace, cultural, or other significant public or private endeavors. And
wow.
And he should be awarded the highest civilian award of the United States. And
thank you.
And I do hope that one day that will happen, because
thank you.
He's touched so many lives, including mine, including yours, and including so many people. And
yes.
And I haven't heard any negative things about him. So it's all positive from there.
Yes. It has all been positive for me too.
Yeah. And I want to sum up everything that we discussed so far. So first, a posthumous degree, because he deserves, and he was heading towards graduation. Secondly, an economics and history fellowship. Thirdly, Megan's Law, but for violent offenders, which might be named Seth's Law. More proactive police presence in the Berkeley community. And finally, more publicity for Seth's name, whether it's giving him more media coverage or even awarding him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And that's all we have so far. I want to thank you, Michelle, for having this wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really grateful that you're elevating my son. I appreciate that very much.
And I do want to ask, what are your social medias? What are your, how can viewers reach you if they wanted to, learn more about your work and see how famous you really are?
I wouldn't say famous, just very active in my son's name. The only platform I'm really prevalent on is Twitter. I have Facebook, but Facebook is like going to your reunion and seeing all the people from high school. Twitter is more global. And I do have about almost 12,000 followers. Not quite. I've lost a few recently. I'm not on Reddit. I'm not on some of those others, but I am very active on Twitter. I may be moving to another platform. We'll see. I may be adding another one, but right now that's kind of the presence I have.
Awesome. And what's your username for users?
Oh, just my name.
So Michelle Rhodes-Smith, correct? Okay, awesome. Well, hopefully everyone checks out Michelle Rhodes-Smith, gives her a follow, and continues to support her and support her son and really memorializing and honoring your son.
Thank you so much, Ken.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for listening to this episode of The Robots Are Coming. Next time we'll have even more great professors, teachers like Michelle, and more great people to interview. So make sure you subscribe to The Robots Are Coming wherever you're listening to, and tell all your friends to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.